Every now and then a movie comes along that manages to surprise me, and I think that would be a good way to describe 2021's Nobody, a movie that I watched with no expectations whatsoever, yet somehow it ended up really impressing me. Now, even before seeing Nobody 1, I never had a doubt that Bob Odenkirk was a good actor, especially after seeing him in shows like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, which really highlighted his range. Still, doing more of an action-orientated role wasn't necessarily an obvious fit for Odenkirk, but in the first Nobody movie, he really stepped up to the challenge. In addition to that, the whole concept of this suburban father who has a past as an assassin was compelling, and while the movie didn't exactly reinvent the wheel or wasn't really groundbreaking, it was written and directed in a very solid way, with some great action scenes that were very well executed. Now, in many cases, I'm not too excited when they announce a sequel to a good movie, but in this case, I thought, well, it could actually be okay, because all you really need here is a good setup for Bob Odenkirk's character to be caught up in another scenario that he has to kick some butt. And when I saw those first trailers for Nobody 2, it seemed like the movie would do just that. While I was pretty sure that the movie wouldn't necessarily be as fresh and interesting as its predecessor, I thought that if nothing else, Nobody 2 would at least be pretty good. Unfortunately though, after watching this movie, I have to admit that I left the theater kind of disappointed. Now, in this video, I'm going to be discussing the general plot for Nobody 2 without going into any kind of real spoilers or revealing anything that we haven't already seen in trailers and marketing. But before we begin, if it's not too much trouble, please take a second to like and subscribe to my channel, as any support an independent reviewer like myself could get would be greatly appreciated.
Do it.
Nobody 2 picks up sometime after the events of the first movie. Due to the damage that Odenkirk's Hutch has done to some Russian criminals, he's now expected to pay off a debt by doing contract work, but all this shady business that he's involved in is causing him to become more distant from his family, so he comes up with a brilliant idea of taking his wife and kids to a place called Plummersville, an old-school amusement water park resort where his own father took him and his brother when they were kids. And Hutch's father joins the family on their vacation too. Once Hutch and his family arrive at Plummersville, everything seems fine, but very quickly, after his son gets into trouble with some locals, Hutch unwittingly gets pulled into an unexpected conflict with both criminals and local law enforcement, even though he tries his best to de-escalate the situation. And somehow, the more Hutch spends time in this town, things just keep getting worse for him and his family. Ultimately, Hutch has no choice but to step into action once again, even at the risk of sacrificing his much-needed vacation. In addition to Christopher Lloyd, both Connie Nielsen and RZA return in their respective roles as Hutch's wife and brother, and while there were some hints about Connie Nielsen's character in the first movie, this installment attempts to give her a bit more of a backstory. Now, on the surface, I think that everything I've described here sounds pretty good for a movie like this, and that's really how I felt after seeing the marketing for it, which is probably why I had high hopes for Nobody 2. The problem is, this movie just doesn't seem to come together in the same way that the previous one did, as if it's somehow less than the sum of its parts. Not necessarily unwatchable, but there are too many moments in this movie where it feels like it's just going through the motions, in terms of action, in terms of story, suspense, tension, and it's not like I was really expecting anything revolutionary here. But sadly, I don't think this movie even reaches the level of being pretty good. If I had to point out one of the weakest parts of this movie, it's the casting of veteran actress Sharon Stone as the big bad criminal in this movie. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have a movie where a woman is behind a criminal enterprise, but specifically, the way that her character acts and the way they present her seems more like a role that I would have given an actor like Gary Oldman. Don't get me wrong, Sharon Stone has put in some great performances in movies like Casino, Basic Instinct, and Total Recall, but this role in Nobody 2 really doesn't play to her strengths, so most of her time her performance comes off as silly, cringe, and forced, which is never a good idea in a movie where the villain has to seem like a credible threat. Because if you can't take the villain seriously, you can't really buy into any kind of danger that's presented on screen. Towards the end of the movie, there were a few moments that felt very girl-bossy to me, and I thought that they were completely unnecessary, as this is a movie that first of all caters to more of a male audience. At the end of the day, as much as I felt disappointed watching the movie, movie, if nothing else, it was still nice to see actors like Bob Odenkirk and Christopher Lloyd on screen, and while they weren't given such good material to work with, I don't think that either of them phoned in their performance or anything, especially Bob Odenkirk, who really does his best to carry the movie, so I guess if there's any kind of redeeming quality about the movie, it's seeing him in this role again. And at the end of the day, while I was generally disappointed by Nobody 2, it wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen, it just didn't rise to the level of the previous one. Now, for those that are not familiar with how I rate movies, anything below a 60 out of 100 is considered a failing grade, and while I consider the first Nobody from 2021 an 80 out of 100, for me, this second installment is something like a 65 out of 100. It's okay if you're looking to pass a few hours in a movie theater, even though it's nothing to write home about, but if you want to get more honest reviews from an independent reviewer like myself, please make sure to like and subscribe, as it would really help my channel. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.